Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Way T Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Show. And today we are pumped and excited because we are going to be talking to none other than Mark Devine, who is an expert in elite performance, mental toughness, and leadership development for teams. His renowned SEALFIT and Unbeatable Mind training programs have transformed tens of thousands from all walks of life, helping everyday leaders optimize their full potential in life. Mark's own leadership skills were initially honed in the Navy SEALs, where he was honor man, that's a #1 graduate of his BUDS class, while leading his entire boat crew to success, which has never been repeated. Now, of course, he went on to build several businesses afterwards, two which have scaled to 8 figures. Mark's work addresses integration and training of whole body, mind, spirit systems, an approach he calls 5 mountains, emphasizing physical, mental, emotional, intuitional, and spiritual development, which he created and tested on over 1,000 special operations candidates worldwide, generating a 90% success rate for SEAL trainees using this program. So Mark teaches this unique warrior leader philosophy to executives, corporate leaders, elite sports teams, and entrepreneurs with a mission to lead 100 million people to the path of integrated 5 mountain development by 2045. And today we're going to talk about developing or forging, which I love that word, an unbeatable mind, leadership leading with emotional power, and the way of the SEAL, overcoming in times of adversity. There's never been a time, I think, in civilian history, certainly in my age right now, where we need to address this. And what I'm so delighted to have you on the show with is right now, I think there's a lot of people kind of expecting other people to step up or take over or take control of this kind of unusual circumstance we're in the world. And you've taken some time to address some of these issues with us. So welcome to the show.
Wade, thanks. We're going to need to find a shorter bio, by the way.
Well, you know, I've been fascinated, particularly, I'm learning a little bit more about the whole SEAL culture, largely in part because of the success of Jocko Willink and how his book, Extreme Ownership, which is one of the components that we've integrated into our company philosophy, which has had remarkable effects as a concept and an idea. Can you share with us how your SEAL training kind of translated both into the business and your training and what you teach today? Like how did that kind of come through? Like how much of it was from the SEALs and how much of it was maybe aspects that were missing maybe from what your career was there?
Oh man, that's a really good question in a sense, but it's pretty broad. So I'll just, I'll cherry pick a few things. SEALs, the SEALs are called the SEAL teams for a reason. They're not the SEAL individuals, right? It's not the U.S. Navy SEAL individuals. So one of the first and most powerful things I learned in SEAL teams is that everything that we do gets done through and with the team. And individuals whose ego is too big to allow others to lead or to or think that they're supposed to be the alpha dog, and you would expect that from SEALs. And a lot of people end up getting washed out really quickly because they're the alpha dog or they're used to being the star quarterback on their high school football team or whatever. They were used to being the all-star and always having the last say and always being in charge. The arrogant ones, they get washed out within the first week. And oftentimes, the quiet, humble guy who you would never expect to be a SEAL is the honor man of the class or, is ends up being the best leader. So I learned that leadership is not what it looks like on the surface. Everything is done through the team, and leading the team is really about unlocking the vast potential of each of the team members if you were the de facto leader. And I noticed that the best teams looked like they had no leader. And so I've really worked to kind of embody that in my leadership of corporate teams. And it's been difficult because the SEALs have a huge advantage over, organizational teams because they have, billions of dollars put into this brand and this culture and this recruitment and this incredibly arduous selection process. So the people who end up actually on your team are the best of the best. And their egos have been largely tamped down, and they're great teammates because they just spent several years, learning that skill. So in the corporate world, I got my ass handed to me a few times, just expecting that others would act that way, or would have some, would have that level of team ability and loyalty and trust. And that's not true. And so I've learned that in the corporate world, in order to get anywhere close to that, you've got to train people, right? You've got to bring them along, and you've got to prove to them, like you were talking about before we started, that extreme ownership of all your behaviors, all your thoughts, all your decisions, everything you do, how you show up every day. If you show up hungover, you're letting your team down, right? If you show up with a lack of sleep and out of shape, you're letting your team down. If you're letting your team down. Everything you do is going to be projected into that team. It's going to affect the team's performance, whether you're the leader or just the lowest guy or woman on the totem pole. And so, this is one of the things that we really work hard with our clients on, is that everybody's important. Everybody's got to work hard every day on being the best version of themselves, and then bringing that best version of themselves to the team without trying to be, I'm not saying being the perfect version, because the perfect version is the least best version of yourself. So we obliterate perfectionism, judgmentalism, and righteousness, and show up as wholehearted, authentic, admitting our weaknesses and owning our strengths and being a good teammate. It's really that simple, but it's very, very hard to achieve, right? Until everyone's really bought into that. And then all of a sudden you see this massive potential being unlocked, and teams just conquering. Doesn't matter, something, COVID, all right, we'll pivot. We got this. You know what I mean? The mindset is bring it on. What's the next challenge, right? Is this all you got? Right? Because there's so much potential that is unlocked. It's not, arithmetic, it's geometric, right? If you got an 8 or a 10 person team, everyone firing at this level I'm talking about, the leaderless team where everybody's a leader and everybody's a teammate simultaneously, the team is leading the way itself, the collective consciousness, like it's unstoppable. Unbeatable is the term we use.
Which is, you talk about the unbeatable mind. That was a great description. And I think that's really lacking in a lot of the corporate structure. There's this kind of 1950s version that you climb to the C-suite and right. You sit there overlooking the vision and
right. You earn the corner window view, right?
Right. Exactly. And in today's world, oftentimes too, I think the trajectory and the rise and fall of different media channels and marketing channels or business channels is one thing, but also as the individual faces maybe changes in their career, or it's a much more complex world than maybe that worldview was in 1950.
Big time. But in fact, let's drill into that a little bit. The 1950s, the world was complicated, but complicated was understandable. Complicated is like a machine or a bureaucratic system, and that was the leadership and management thinking back then. And a lot of the best leadership management thinking back then actually came from the traditional military, and like TQL and TQM and Six Sigma and all that stuff. And it was meant to be able to understand and deal with a complicated system. But that system was linear, and it was understandable, and it was navigable with planning, with a methodology. They had relentless execution of data and processes. That world is gone, right, Wade? It is
totally
gone, gone.
Yep.
So now we're working in a world that is complex. And the difference between complexity and complication is that complexity is not understandable by a human mind. You can't map it out.
Right.
A complex system is completely not understandable, except for maybe by the most advanced quantum computers, and even they're just estimating, because it's an unknown. Right? What comes out of complexity is unknown, and so you have to make guesses. You have to trust your intuition. You have to use the soft skills that the SEALs use, because every situation we operated in was complex. We didn't know, because the enemy gets to say The weather gets a say, right? Everything has a say on your plan. And we had no plan survives contact with the enemy. And so within that complex environment, we had to have a really clear vision of what our desired outcome was and what our acceptable boundaries for that outcome was. There was no precise win.
Right. Because things get very complicated.
Right.
You know, weather conditions, they've made alterations. You find there's more bad guys.
Right.
Guys get hurt, whatever.
Who knows? There could be 100 things that go wrong. You expect at least half of them to go wrong.
Right.
You may get to the target and the wrong guy's there, but you may roll up some guy who turns out valuable. Okay, that's a win. You may get to the target and find out that the right guy's there, but he's already dead. Okay, fine. That's a win, right? You may get to the target and find that nobody's there, and yet you gather some valuable intelligence. That's a win. You may get to the target, and the only thing that you have left from that op is learning some valuable lessons along the way, and nobody's there, and you walk home empty-handed. That's a win, right? We used to have a saying, there's no such thing as failure, or failure is not an option. And that didn't mean that you couldn't fail. It meant that you couldn't really fail if the only way to fail is to quit. You know, everything is a win if you learn how to learn and contextualize from it. And that's another way to deal with complexity, is like, you don't have any like very specific defined outcomes. You don't get expectation hangovers because you have no expectations. You don't know what's going to come. So you just keep on failing forward fast as you can, and getting faster and better at failing until you get to some acceptable form of victory.
One of the things I think is fascinating, and I would suspect this is something that's very valuable, and I think Tony Robbins outlines it, is there's two different basic psychologies: the need for certainty and the need for uncertainty. And obviously in a SEAL unit, you're dealing with high levels of certainty about the competence of each individual and their characteristics and abilities, I would imagine, and how they interact with the team. But you're dealing with incredibly uncertain situations.
Yeah. Well, I think he says the need for certainty or the need for variety. Those two are often in conflict, right?
Yes.
And so SEALs love variety. In fact, that defines pretty much a Navy SEAL. Navy SEALs are risk takers.
Yes.
They have an extremely high bias for risk, so they're comfortable with uncertainty. And part of the reason they're comfortable with uncertainty is because of the way that they've learned to train their mind, and that is never get comfortable. They never want to be comfortable.
Right.
And so every day they're finding a new discomfort zone, because they've learned that nothing grows in the comfort zone. So you have to, the growth is in the discomfort zone. So they're okay with risk. So that crosses out, the need for certainty for Navy SEALs. And I think everybody needs to be in that category. There's really nothing you can be certain of, except that if you wake up, you have control over a few things: your breath, how you think, and what you put your attention on, right? Nothing outside of you can control. And so everything outside is uncertain. The certainty lies within your only locus of control is your breath, your thoughts, and where you put your attention. And maybe as you get a little bit more talented, your emotions as well. The second part is variety. SEALs absolutely crave variety, right? You put a SEAL at a desk in a corporate job, right? And they'll probably last about 24 hours. They'll be like, screw this, right? Mm-hmm. Because they've learned that variety leads to even more growth. Because, the type of variety that we go for is variety of challenges. Like, if I'm going to learn how to jump, I'm going to learn how to dive, I'm going to learn how to shoot every gun that's ever been made under the sun. I'm going to learn how to drive every vehicle that's ever been produced. And I might even make one of my own or modify the vehicles, right? I need to learn how to fly. I need to learn how to fly a submarine. We call it flying, or drive a submarine. I need to learn how to freaking boogie board my way into a beach on a blacktop boogie board. I need to, learn how to snow ski if I'm going to go operate in Russia or, the Arctic, and then I need to not just learn the basics, I need to learn how to do it really well so I don't let my team down. I may need to learn a language or another language and the culture of this country I'm going to operate in. And we operate in, oh, by the way, tens or of 20s or 30 cultures, throughout the course of our career. So we're always changing jobs. We're always learning new skills. And we just learn that that type of variety combined with challenge leads to accelerating growth, right? Because there's this thing, like Carol Dweck talked about, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Okay, so SEALs are obviously not fixed mindset. Everyone who's listening to this podcast is not likely in the fixed mindset category because they're interested in growth. But there's a difference between growth that just happens by listening to podcasts and by being interested in things and reading a book here and there, and the growth that happens when you try an enormous number of new challenging things, year in and year out, year over year. And that leads to this explosive growth. It's even hard to quantify. Like I've seen people that, come to SEAL training who I thought there's no way this guy is going to make it. He's a total dunce. He makes it. I see him 20 years later and they've got a PhD. They've got, they've been around the world 3 times. They've, driven every vehicle. Like I said, they've jumped out of airplanes at 40,000 feet. They've met prime ministers and they married the princess. And I'm like, wow, I never saw that coming. And I've seen that time and time and time again. And it's one of the things that, again, I really, really try to, or what we try to encourage our clients, especially in our high-end coaching programs at Unbeatable Mind, is you got to have lots of variety and challenge and just watch that spark, like this intense accelerating growth, and then just ride it, and enjoy it. It's powerful.
I think this is by the way, that was an extraordinary illustration of the psychology and component. And obviously this probably carries into your brand, Unbeatable Mind. And I'm sitting there thinking, as an ordinary civilian running a company, wow, if I had every person on my team or in my house or in my group that had that kind of psychology, well, geez, 12 people, you could pretty much take over a country in 6 months. So let's
small enough one.
Yeah.
We might need a few more if it's
right,
like China or something.
right. Yeah, let's talk about that unbeatable mind. And as an ordinary civilian who hasn't had the benefit of going through that training, but yet can cultivate that in approach to their life, because I can see instantaneously, I think anybody listening to that says, well, man, if I got excited about everything that was complicated or challenged or difficult or didn't know what to do, and then I get to that point where those things aren't intimidating, they're in fact, there must be a point where you go from, I don't know if I can do this, this seems like a lot, I can't get myself out of bed, to like, there's a flip point, I would imagine, that people go through where all of a sudden that is what they crave, and they become emboldened by the more complex or the more difficult or the newest challenge.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what the unbeatable mind is you're cultivating? Is there, am I getting it right? Or can you explain that?
Definitely. Yes, in a sense, right? So unbeatable mind has, like at its broadest philosophical sense, has 2 components. One is to master the interior, to unlock your massive potential. And we say you have 20 times more potential than you think you have. And once you tap into that, then there's 20 times that, and then 20 times that. It's like virtually unlimited, if not unlimited. It requires a certain set of skills to tap into that. And that was the origin of Unbeatable Mind, was to really define those skills, to codify them, to test them through trial and error with Navy SEAL and special ops candidates. And that's how the whole Unbeatable Mind program came about. Because I started these long, these 30-day warrior monk live-in academies where we would train SEAL candidates from 0 dark 30, sometimes around the clock, for 30 days straight. We had 1 day off. And out of that came 3 books, 3 entire online training programs, and literally the entire Navy SEALs have adopted, a chunk of the training that we evolved out of that, the mental training, the unbeatable mind training. So the SEALFIT part is a full on business. That started as SEALFIT. The training that we did called the SEALFIT operator workouts are like unparalleled in their kickassery, and they're hard. That book is a New York Times bestseller. That came out of those early days of all that training. The second piece was The Unbeatable Mind. There's another best-selling book called Unbeatable Mind, and our online training and our corporate training, our leadership training, all evolved out of that. And the third is called Kokoro Yoga, or it's our warrior yoga program, which is really an integration of like CrossFit, martial arts, and traditional yoga combined with breathing, meditation, and visualization. So it's really, really powerful movement practice. And that was kind of our recovery and one of the ways that we trained some of the inner skills. Now, back to your question. The skills that I had to codify for Unbeatable Mind were initially to help these kids, these young men, and now young women, tap into that potential of the inner domain. Because I learned through SEAL training, everybody was fit.
Right.
It didn't matter. It was all the mind and emotions and your clarity about purpose. So I didn't really have to do a lot of work on the clarity of purpose and how you're going to serve in the world with SEAL candidates, because they were going to be Navy SEALs in their minds, right? That was their purpose.
Right.
But when I started training civilians, that's when the second part came out, is like, once you tap your 20x potential, what are you going to do? Just make more money, right? Go conquer more women or men. What are you going to do with it? Mm-hmm. And what I realized and I found in my own life is that the more you grow with the Unbeatable Mind principles, the more you are driven to serve, because you evolve along, the classic developmental stages of evolution. You move beyond the ego, beyond your sense of ethnographic, my team versus your team, my country versus your team, into this, what one of my mentors, Ken Wilber, calls the world-centric kind of orientation. Eventually even cosmocentric, where all beings are important to you, and you feel connected to them and not disconnected, which leads to, a sense of separation and conflict, which is why we see so much conflict in the world today, is because most people are operating out of the egocentric, disconnected, separated sense of self. So you naturally grow through these stages. And so I started working with corporate leaders and entrepreneurs, and they're all starting to tap into this energy, and they're like, how can I serve? And I said, okay, we need to help you figure out what it is you're meant to do, actually, besides just be a CEO or just be a leader or just sell this product. There's something in you that's like this archetypal drive and this soul calling that is unique to you. It's unique to everyone. We've got to help you find that. And that's what I found sitting on the Zen bench. I tell that story in my book, The Way of the SEAL, when I was a CPA. I was getting my MBA, working as a CPA, 23, 24 years old. And I had taken up meditation at 21, and it was revealed to me, that I was meant to be a warrior. And that the way I was meant to do that, because of my unique passions and my epigenetic, kind of upbringing, was to be a military operator, a special operator. And that's when I learned about the SEALs. I didn't know anything about the SEALs. In 1983, 84, there weren't movies and TV shows about the SEALs.
Right.
No, nada. And it was secret. So that's a really cool story. But, so back to my question, or back to my soliloquy here. Mastering the internal domain for what? So that you can serve powerfully in the world. How? Serve as a world-centric leader, where your actions have an impact at a global level and they do no harm at a global level. That requires multidimensional perspective taking, systems thinking, complexity theory, understanding chaos theory, understanding the ramifications of your decisions as a leader, both on your team internally focused as well as externally, and how it ripples out across the world. And again, imagine if everyone thought this way 100 years ago, 50 years ago, even 20 years ago, we wouldn't be in the position we are environmentally, or, with the trade systems that are so lopsided, and, everything that's just really goon things up.
That is most about, ego aggrandizement, or I win, you lose.
I win, you lose, linear thinking, extraction mentality, win-lose mentality. not thinking, multidimensionally, multi-perspectively, and also non-linearly, because the world doesn't work in a linear fashion. Complexity is not linear, right? It's the butterfly effect, right? So
yes,
my decision in the boardroom here, if I'm Shell Oil or if I'm Blackwater or BlackRock or Amazon or Apple or Facebook, affects things across the world. So we got to think very, very, very carefully about our impact, our footprint, and how we can have a world-centric impact. Now we can still make a lot of money, but we want to be good and do good while we make good money. So that became the second part of Unbeatable Mind. And over the years, we've developed an enormous amount of tools and practices to help individuals and teams, because again, back to my first leadership lesson, nothing important is done without a team. So these tools work equally well when done collectively as a team, the internal tools and the impact tools. So and they kind of go together. Like it's not like we spend 6 months on one, the internal tools and then 6 months on the external tools. They work hand in glove. It's like I think the yin yang symbol is a great example, right? One side is dark and one side is light, but they're have a kind of an interesting little S curve, right? And the light
and a dot of each, a dot of
right.
the darkness and the light, and a dot of
that's
the light
right,
and the dark,
exactly,
right?
because that's right. Because they're kind of like they're talking about a little bit of polarity, unless you're right on the line. And an unbeatable mind, someone who's been practicing it for years, they operate at that razor's edge on the line between the light and the dark, between action and inaction, between mastery and potential and mastery of performance. Potential being internally driven, performance being externally driven. They co-arise. That's mastery. Meaning in the moment of decision, I'm 100% tapped into my spiritual center. The decision that is making is flowing from that, not from my ego. It's spontaneous wisdom, and it will have a positive ripple effect on the world because it's, the energy is vibrating at a very high level. It's coming from love, it's coming from truth, and it's coming from wisdom. It's not coming from, I need to be right, I need to win, I need to dominate, this is better for the bottom line, right? Or I'm acting out of some projection or judgmentalism or righteousness, or I'm being codependently reactionary to some narcissist, right? Something like that, which are actually very common. I mean, most communication is some version of what I just said there in that last little piece. Mm-hmm. Anyways, that's the ideal. It's not easy to get to. It could take a lifetime, probably never happen for most people, but working toward it is the goal. And Unbeatable Mind is a path, kind of like a martial art is a path. It's a path to tapping into the highest and best version of yourself potentially, and then expressing that in service so that you can make a positive impact in the world that's right for you, that's unique to you, that nobody else can do on this planet.
It brings up a thought because I've been meditating now for 20 years and have read many stories of mystics and kind of the Eastern model of training. And what's interesting is a lot of the spiritual training involves physical and mental discipline
that's right.
At what most Westerners would say is completely unreasonable and borderline abuse.
There's a reason for that. And I've tapped into a lot of that right through the martial arts. And I've studied ninjutsu, sansu, kung fu. I'm now brown belt in Aikido because that's a crazy hard art to learn. Beautiful. It's not really a martial art. It's the art of peace. So it's like the anti-martial art. Karate, of course. Yoga, Ashtanga yoga is ball buster. I never got past the second series out of 6 series, right? It's like impossible. You got to be the skinny little bean to be able to do all the movements, right? There's a reason for that. And it's one of the reasons that Navy SEALs tap into that accelerated growth, right? Mm-hmm. And here it is. Your body is your mind. And so if you don't perfect your body, work toward perfecting your body and understanding every little aspect, every little nook and cranny, every little emotion, every little stored energy, every way to move, back, forward, around in circles, upside down, every single plane. And understanding how the breath works with all those movements, and how the breath moves your brain mind, your thinking mind, and how the breath moves your emotional mind, how the breath opens up your heart mind and your gut, your biome mind, and your entire nervous system. So and the yogi said it best, you purify, strengthen, and integrate mind into body. And that's the only way to experience whole mind. And even the ancient Greeks got that, right? They understood through gymnastics. That's what gymnastics was. Mm-hmm. And so we've kind of gotten away from that in the Western world because we like to partition everything. And our science is that way, and academia is that way. Physical fitness is over here, and academic is like the realm of the mental. But that's just like tiny, tiny, tiny bit of developing the mind. And forget about the emotions. That's when you're broken. Right. Then, maybe you go see a therapist or something. Right. And spirituality is a church. Well, no, that's not really. I mean, it can be, but so they're all meant to be together. It's like a Rorschach nesting doll, right? At the outer level, there's the physical, and then there's the mental and the personality. And that, that's like the koshas from the yoga tradition you're probably familiar with, or at least similar to that. And then you get into the intuitive and the spiritual at the very center. So you got to work from the outside to get to the spirit at the center, and then you bring it back out. Like it enlivens and lightens your entire body, and that becomes your mind. You think from the whole body.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip, rapid cheat meal relief. Research shows that cheat meals can actually be an effective way to boost your metabolism. One key weight loss hormone, leptin, can be increased by up to 30% following a cheat meal. The challenge with the cheat meals is that all those extra calories and lower food quality can be hard to digest, which means you could be totally sidelined with a food coma after big cheat meals. The solution is to take strong digestive enzymes like masszymes, which will help rapidly digest and break down the extra food. 3 to 5 capsules before or right after your cheat meal can make a huge difference in how you feel following the cheat meal. If it's a cheat day with multiple large meals, you might want to go up to 10 capsules or higher to help you power through all that food. To save 10% on masszymes, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and enter the code CHEAT10 at checkout.
It's so eloquently put, and summation of, I think, of what a lot of people are kind of read in a philosophical ideal, or they will theme through a movie,
right.
The master and the student, and that kind of thing.
Those are so awesome, by the way.
I've always been fascinated with them,
and everyone thinks it's just some fantasy, but I'm like you. I have read every book that I can get my hands on around yoga. The older, the better. Mm-hmm. And I tend to be a believer, right? When I read about Babaji and some of this that Yogananda talks about having seen, and when I hear about, the martial artist who was 250 years old, or nobody really knew how old he was, but he lived in the woods because he couldn't be around people because they were too negative. Mm-hmm. And he's just like living on mostly air and just eating, a few food. He knows exactly what to eat at what time of day, at what time of season. And I'm like, I think that's possible. And now, medicine is starting to look at aging as a disease. And they're like, there's no reason that this human body should age. And that they're talking about, I just read a fascinating book called Lifespan from a Harvard, one of at the forefront, this guy named Sinclair is at the forefront of the longevity movement.
David Sinclair.
David, yeah. Yes. I want to get him on my podcast. And, we're at the edge. Like, you're younger than I am, I think, a little bit, probably. No question that you'll live to 130 or 40 or 50 because you're healthy and you're fit and you train. You do all the blue zone stuff already. So do I. I'm 57. I expect to live to 150 to 60 or 80, something like that. But because we're going to have science on our side, but mainly I look at it from the yoga perspective. If you can take in more energy every day than you give out, and you can retrain with your mind, your epigenetics, to turn off the aging, right? And to turn on the longevity genes, and you believe that you can live a long time, I think you can live a long time, right? Now, not all the yogis did, and I think that there's probably part of that. There's part of this that says if your spirit says it's okay to live a long time, you will. Correct. In the future. But if you're meant to have a 40-year life and then suddenly, a lightning bolt hits you, you're going to have a 40-year-old life and a lightning bolt's going to hit you. You know what I mean? So this conversation doesn't mean that everybody's going to be able to do this. I think we also all have kind of a trajectory, and even the yogi said this, you have a clock, but at the mastery level, you can manipulate that clock.
I believe that's true. I had read through Dr. David Hawkins and
I love Hawkins.
Yeah. His map of consciousness, and I used to go to these events.
Did you really?
And, yeah.
I wish I'd met him when he was alive. He's one of my mentors, but I've never met him. One
of the most remarkable beings I've ever met. In fact, when I first 100%. Saw him, the energy field coming off him was like light permeating through your whole body. And
I believe it.
I went through a series of systematic questions with him to kind of work out a big spiritual knot I had, and I'll say that for another time. But one of the things that he said in regards to longevity is when one hits a certain level of consciousness, then there's an invitation to leave the body because the world doesn't serve the evolution of the soul at that point. However, if one transcends that and remains here, it is because of some karmic need, which interestingly enough is some sort of service to mankind itself. Right. And oftentimes this is where you have the truly realized master that spreads forth its teachings. And, historically you could think of at the highest levels, a Buddha or a Jesus or a Krishna or something like that, who had achieved the maximum capacity that the nervous system can handle on this plane of existence. And their being, thoughts, and processes have permeated now through cultures for thousands of years. We don't really think about that, but it's true. Right. So going back to, because this kind of stuff I just get really jazzed on, and someone who embraces it and takes people through the practical applications, because it's not enough to watch a movie, read a book, go to a meditation class. Okay. There's certain feedback loops, I would say, is required in order for you to actually get an accurate gauge of where you are on that spectrum. And also someone that can help identify those areas where you need to overcome the flat spots. Because there's a unique thing that happens when I try to share this with people, is like, everybody has areas where they really suck. And it's a real big awareness to realize where you do suck. But there's kind of like this intermediary stage where you don't know that you suck. You just are totally oblivious to how bad you are. And even worse, sometimes you think
unconscious incompetence. Right?
Yeah. And so developing this unbeatable mind, which sounds extremely attractive, I must say. I'm sure you're going to get signups for this immediately because I'm like, yeah, this is my kind of stuff. Can you walk me through maybe just an overview of what it looks like to kind of, involve yourself in your coaching and talk about the unbeatable mind, or cultivating this and developing this? Because if there's ever been a time in the world that people need to develop an unbeatable mind, this is the time right now. Right now, people are challenged, their process. And I believe that there's only the wave of chaos. We just saw we just saw the rising. We have this wave hasn't broke onto the shores of reality.
Not even close. I agree.
Right. I'm kind of doing the math as I see the businesses close and I see the debts going up and these crazy ideas. I'm like, okay, we're headed for a big wave here. Yet inside of that, syntropy and entropy, which are different aspects, there needs to be a collapse of what doesn't work in order for the entropy for a new complex.
That's right.
Organizing. But in order to do that, this razor's edge, which is really developing the unbeatable mind, that you can handle the uncertainty, handle the chaos, and unlock the really the superhuman powers that lie dormant within all of us.
Right.
What does that process look for people to engage in and to participate in and say, you know what, I need an unbeatable mind. I need to develop this. What do I need to do?
First of all, unless you've been meditating for 20 years, or if you've done no meditating, or if you're just dinking around with it, then you need to start a practice, a daily practice. You need to step into the light side of the yin yang symbol and begin a daily practice to curate the quality, quantity, and directionality of your thoughts, and then to begin to disengage from the thoughts and emotions, and to we call that witnessing, to begin to recognize the deeper aspect of your being, that eternal nature. This is doable, right? It's doable. And so we recommend, or we require, I should say, else you're not really doing Unbeatable Mind. Unbeatable Mind, first of all, is a path. It requires work. We're not offering like some supplement that is supposed to change you immediately into an unbeatable person.
No magic beans with this program.
There's no magic bean. There's no red pill, right? I don't have the red pill for you. The red pill is the work. And so the work is the practice. The practice is what you do when you wake up in the morning. There's two primary practice times: when you wake up and when you go to bed. The morning ritual and the evening ritual. In the morning ritual, there's a lot involved, but the primary practice we call a stacked practice, and we call it the box breathing continuum, because it's bracketed with this breathing practice that we developed called box breathing. Now, it's nothing new. It's just pranayama in a 4-part 5-count pattern. 5-count inhale, 5-count hold, 5-count exhale, 5-count hold, each count being about a second. So we're talking about 3 breaths per minute. Now, the first part of this practice is arousal control. So you're doing nothing but, this is not the whole morning ritual, by the way, because there's other aspects of it, but everyone's got their piece of the morning ritual: journaling, positivity, some movement. We encourage all of that. I'm talking specifically about the secret weapon that is going to get you evolving fast, Hawkins style. First, back to the body. We need to de-stress the body. There's the long-term de-stressing, which is why this has to be a daily practice. If you miss a day, big problem, right? Because you're going to overload stress, and you're going to be taking 2 steps backwards. We take on a ton of stress every day. You need to de-stress that. Get your body and brain back into balance. So the first 5 minutes I recommend of this practice is just breathing for arousal control. 5 count in through your nose, 5 count out, 5 count hold, 5 count out, 5 count hold. And as you know, and most listeners know by now, but when I was teaching this in 2006, nobody knew this stuff. That triggers the parasympathetic nervous system by massaging the vagus nerve, by, all this stuff. And so you're releasing all the fear-based neurotransmitters and replacing them with the rest and digest, the courage-based neurotransmitters, and you're calming down. So this sets the stage for the second phase of the practice. The second phase, which I recommend 5 to 10 minutes, is concentration and attention control. So this is where now, instead of just breathing and saying, man, I'm feeling better, I'm getting de-stressed, now we take our mind and we radically focus it on the box pattern. And I recommend to my folks, if you're a visual person or if you're not a visual person, practice your visualization skills by visualizing the box pattern in your mind with your eyes closed as you're breathing it. That becomes your focus of attention. So your attention control is to control your attention to be on that box pattern. The concentration training is to hold your attention on that box pattern in imagery for as long as possible. The third skill that comes out of that is the redirect, because you will wander, you will split your attention and start thinking again, right? We know this from mindfulness, but this isn't mindfulness. This is very different. This is attention control, concentration, and redirection. The redirection part is when your mind starts thinking, unlike mindful awareness, where you're just kind of like, oh, there's a thought, interesting, maybe I'll label it. You say, no, that's not what I'm doing right now. And you snap back to the box. So you're training, one, the ability to control my attention, where I'm putting my attention on the box pattern. You're actually training your visualization skills too. Two, the duration and the intensity that I can hold my attention on that box pattern. The more you practice, the more you're able to concentrate, the more powerful your concentration comes. This is really important for later on. And then three, your ability to notice when your attention has split and to bring it back really quickly, which is a redirection or re-attention gaining skill, which is really important, again, for any executive or leader listening to this. So that's part two. We train that every day after the body has been calmed down through the de-stressing of the arousal control. Now, the third part we call mindful awareness, which is very similar to mindfulness, but people practice mindfulness in different ways. And, it's a little bit kludgy, right? Just like meditation is a word that's been kind of corrupted by the West because nobody knows really what it means. Mm-hmm. Same with mindfulness. So we say mindful awareness, and that is to be mindfully aware. So let me back up. At phase 3, let's say 15 minutes into this practice, you let go of that concentration. You let it go. You take your foot off the gas pedal, you relax, you expand out a little bit, and now you're going to let content arise. You remember Hawkins talks about context versus content?
Yes.
So now what happens, because you've deepened the powers of concentration, now what you do is you create this metacognitive shift where now you're turning that concentration on, and you're just watching the thoughts. But you're not, because you've practiced this redirection, you're now not connected to the thoughts. You're not merged with the thoughts.
Correct. They're just content arising in a sense of
content's arising, and the metaphors I love Hawkins and other spiritual leaders use is like, in that state, you are the ocean and the thoughts are like waves kind of brimming on the surface, and emotions are waves brimming. Or, your witnessing self is the mountain and the thoughts are like the clouds drifting by in the sky. You're not the clouds. You're not wrapped up in them. There's no drama there. Oh, look at that thought. Oh, there's another one. Interesting. Oh, look at that emotion over there. And then it drifts on by. You don't grab it. You don't like lasso it and ride it like a horse. You know what I mean?
Correct.
So you just watch. And this is the long-term benefit of this pattern, is the decoupling from the egoic mind. You're not your thoughts anymore. You're not your emotions. You're beyond that. You're something beyond that. And you start to get curious about that. Like, if I'm not that, then who am I? Which brings to mind Ramana Maharshi's famous meditation, who am I? You can't, if you ask who am I from ego, from thoughts and emotion, you get, I am Mark Divine, Navy SEAL, MBA, CPA, badass mother effer. You know what I mean? I could kill you with one pinky. Right? Yeah. That's not who
you and you'll die.
Exactly. Look at that's ego. But when I ask who am I from the witness, I'm like, wow, I'm not all that. That's just story. That's just story and experiences. That's not who I am. I'm something much deeper. And so then we do what the Taoists called turn that light around. So you've got this flashlight of awareness that you're using to just kind of examine your thoughts and emotions. And oh, by the way, this is where you start to recognize patterns that aren't serving you. This one skill is so important for leaders, because you're like, oh, look at that pattern over there. That's based upon fear, or that's based upon some childhood trauma, or that's whatever. It's not serving me. So I've got to find some replacement for those, which is another skill we teach in Unbeatable Mind. So that's an outcome of this third part of the practice. But the fourth part is where we make the money. This is where we get into Hawkins level, truth, wisdom, and love. It's where we turn that flashlight around and we look at pure awareness itself. We look at that as the truth, as the big I versus the little I of my ego. And that becomes, but if you go straight there, this is why people fail. They don't know what the hell you're talking about in meditation, because if you try to go straight there, you end up in fantasy, or you end up with grandiosity. And this happens with like Kundalini, or people who have a peak experience in ayahuasca and suddenly think that they're God, or, they've got it all figured out.
Right. You go to the end without earning the right to get there.
Correct. They call it a spiritual bypass.
Yeah.
Kriya Yoga, a lot of people have, had these great experiences, and all the great spiritual teachers warn against getting stuck in bliss or getting stuck in the light, because that's not it. That's not it.
Yeah, the Patanjali's, I think, identified the supernatural powers that can kind of come to awareness as obstacles.
The cities are obstacles, right?
The cities
walking on water. It's an obstacle. Jesus did it for a reason, but most people,
you don't get addicted to it if you are doing that.
Some people are gonna be like, "What the hell are you guys talking about?"
But it's interesting that so many people get into meditation or getting to a spiritual path or using various, concoctions to kind of have alternative experiences or different aspects of consciousness. And yet they make that mistake. The mind is always trying to grand on something as me, as I am.
That's right. The mind will always try to co-opt your experience. The ego will co-opt it.
And so what you're saying in the cultivation of the unbeatable mind, if I heard you, is to first redefine what mind and me and I is.
Right.
Second, be aware of how those currents are running through your awareness perspective, and then ultimately turning the light down.
Right. You got to
reversing that into
disassembling the ego, and then developing the skill of concentration, so that you can turn that concentration on your inner reality, and then discover pure awareness, the pure context that Hawkins was talking about. Now, here's the funny thing is everyone thinks you want more and more advanced techniques. That's enough, right? This practice is enough, because eventually that turnaround stabilizes. And they call that awakening. Awakening is when there's two stages of awakening. First is just recognition that your awareness and your contextual self is vaster and more the real you than your ego self. But then the ego self, evolves out of that. Just like you can't separate the waves from the ocean. We're not saying, you and I are both not saying that the waves are bad, that thoughts are bad, that emotions are bad. No, we're just saying that that's not who you are in its totality. It's a very, very small aspect of who you are. And you can actually really decide how big the waves are and how long they run, and how wet, maybe not how wet they are, but their form and stuff like that, when you get good at developing the skills.
Correct.
What we're saying is that, do you want to be the ocean or that puny little wave? Right? If you want an unbeatable mind, you got to be the ocean, because that's where your unbelievable vast power comes from. The vast power that allows you to dominate any crisis, any challenge, no matter how painful, how much suffering is involved. It's inconsequential.
Right, because these are just waves. This is just the wave of pain.
It's just the wave.
This is just the wave of lack. This is just the wave of
right,
suffering.
And it'll be gone. Right now, COVID, the wave, seems like a long time, but 2 years is not a long time. 100 years is not a long time. It's not. Right, the wave of some emotional challenge that we're having is not a long time. The wave of dealing with someone's death or your own death, that's hard. But when you have an unbeatable mind, you recognize that that's just a phase, right? Right? The spiritual traditions are beautiful talking about that. Like birth and death are just phases. They're not the end or the beginning even.
I want to be mindful of our time, but I think that is ultimately the fear at the end of the fear loop, if you will. And then I'll die. Which is inevitable reality for all of us, right? I mean, everybody acts like they're going to live forever. No one's going to.
Not even with all the longevity stuff that's happening, and you probably don't want to. You know what I mean? It's like we're not meant to live forever. We're meant to live long enough to fulfill our purpose, which is longer than most people are living today, I think.
So within that statement, as someone has gone through the things, it's not just a concept. You were, I'm sure, engaged in situations where you're quote unquote untimely death was a very real possibility at any given moment.
For sure. I faced it many times.
And I think if we can leave on this, because I want to be mindful of your time, like,
we're just getting warmed up, so we'll probably do this again, right?
Yeah, we're definitely bringing you back because it's so good. What is it like to fully embrace that in a way while maintaining your operational component so that you're literally charging towards this with full awareness, full concentrations, and full acceptance, yet doing everything you can to ensure it doesn't happen at simultaneously?
That's right.
That's the razor's edge of razor's edge.
It's the razor's edge. Well, this is where the epic, warrior saga really helps kind of articulate it. In the warrior archetype, the warrior lives one day as if it's an entire lifetime, because it can be the last. And the warrior wakes up in the morning, everything, every thought, every word, and every action is calculated and precise, because the warrior is preparing for death, because this could be the last day. Every action I take, every decision I make, the way I communicate with my family and my loved ones and my team, the attention and the power of concentration that I give to my most important tasks is intense, because this could be my last day. We call that principle one day, one life. And even Buddha said you can find enlightenment in a single breath if you're paying close enough attention. So the warrior's always seeking enlightenment in the next breath and always expecting death in the next breath. And that philosophy, that way of life, is extraordinary, because that's riding that razor's edge of the yin and yang, where you're 100% engaged in witnessing every moment. The thoughts and emotions have no say over how you're responding to the next situation. You're in total control. And in that control, you're able to be very precise in the choices that you make about what to do, what to say, what to think, what to feel, and how to be in whatever it is that you're meant to do in that day. Now, if we're fortunate enough to close our eyes in the evening after that day, then we have an opportunity to do it over again the next day.
Beautifully said. Can you share where we're going to bring you back? We're just getting started, I feel. Can you share where people can reach out, connect with you, find out about the Unbeatable Mind, the projects that you're involved in, and everything that you're offering? This has just been one of the absolute best interviews I've ever done, and I want to do more and more and more.
It's been a blast. Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. You got some great. Yeah, we got a lot of common interests. Thank you. My website, which is undergoing an overhaul right now, personal one, is markdivine.com. And divine is spelled D-I-V-I-N-E. Some people try to do the D-E thing, but it's D-I-V-I-N-E. And Unbeatable Mind is unbeatablemind.com, all one word. And that's the kind of like, that's my corporation. Mark Divine is where I talk about my books and my podcasts and the speaking engagements. The podcast is called Unbeatable Mind or Mark Divine. You can, do either search on Apple or Google Play or wherever you get podcasts. We have some amazing guests on our podcast too. It's a lot of fun. We should get you on our podcast and have Phil pick up this conversation.
Love it. Love to do that anytime.
Yeah, let's do that. If you're really interested in the physical mental training of SEALFIT, we still run our events, even though COVID shut us down last year. We're planning on, like, I'm getting mad. COVID shut us down.
Yeah.
Actually, California Governor Newsom shut us down. COVID had nothing to do with it, actually.
Yes.
So we're getting back on track in March. We're going to have our 12, 24, and 50-hour events, which are kind of Hell Week models, simulations. So that's sealfit.com. And my Instagram is at Mark Divine. No, I'm sorry, at Real Mark Divine. I don't do Facebook, even though the stuff from Instagram gets posted to Facebook, and I don't do Twitter. I think social media is 10-tentacled beast,
As they say in Star Wars, it's a trap.
It's a trap. It's a trap.
It really is. Yeah, every time I look at my phone and social media, I'm going, oh man, am I doing this again?
That's why I avoid it. I have my team do that stuff. So if you're getting a response, you think it's me, I apologize. It's not. But if you DM me, then my team sends me a text and says, hey, so-and-so DM'd you and wanted to ask this question. I'll respond to them by text and they'll post it. So I am kind of doing it, but that keeps me out of the distraction hole. You know what I mean? Of constantly being on my phone, trying to play catch up on Instagram.
Beautiful.
I'm very protective of my time. I don't do anything before 11 besides train and write and think.
Beautiful. I love
And if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. That's the way I've gotten in my life. It's just, life's too important. Like I said, living that one day, one life, you got to be very, very discreet with how you use your time.
Mark,
and this has been a good use of my time. So thank you very much, Wade.
It's been an honor to have you on here. I know everybody wants you back. I want you back. I want you 5,000 hours. So everybody, hope you enjoyed this podcast with none other than Mark Devine. Do check out the Unbeatable Mind. I think it's something that everybody needs to incorporate the meditation techniques, some of the philosophy you had, and it's someone that's been there, done that, lived it, and continues to do so today. Thank you, sir.
I
appreciate it.
Thank you, Wade.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.